So today we're going to look at how to convert money that's saved into sustained levels of prosperity by domestic investment. And in order to do that, you need to build the capacity for domestic investment. And we're going to call that investing in investing. Investing in the ability to invest well. Remember, you don't want to do a Norway. You don't want to save the money in some financial pot abroad. That's a good idea for Norway because it's so stinking rich already. It's a really stupid idea for a poor country. In order to get rich, you've got to invest domestically. The return on international financial capital at the moment is at best about 1% a year. If you invest well within a country, you can get a return of maybe 15%. So the difficulty is building the capacity that gets you those 15% investments instead of the useless investments, the concrete monuments that actually are called investment but are really just public displays of stupidity. What are the components to investing in investing? And there's going to be 4 of them. One is what the public sector itself does with its own investments. So building the capacity for public investment. The second is going to be building the capacity for private investment. Third is going to be building the financial system. And the fourth is lowering the unit cost of capital goods. So that's our agenda. So let's start with the government itself. The government has to do a lot of public investment. That's where the revenues are coming in. And so it's sensible for the government itself to spend a lot of those revenues on the key things, the good infrastructure, the good education system, and so on. Just throwing money and calling it investment doesn't necessarily produce high-yielding investment projects. And there are 4 steps to getting a good public investment project. First, you've got to design a good project. That's the easy bit. The capacity to design good projects, design a good airport, design a good road system, that set of skills can be bought on the international market relatively cheaply. There's a competitive market in that. So the design stage is easy. Having designed a few projects, the really hard step, which has to be done domestically, is the selection stage. Which projects do you do and which projects do you not do? One of the really clever things that Botswana got right was to build a system of political checks and balances which prevented stupid projects from being selected. And so all projects were subject to a proper cost-benefit analysis done by technicians. And then if it didn't meet a hurdle rate of return, a project wouldn't be done. And that is really important. The danger is that politicians just get ideas in their heads from skimming through a magazine and say, we want an airport here, we want this glamorous project here. You know, I've seen it in California, we're going to have it in our country. That's the road to wasteful investments, to the white elephant monuments. And so building political checks and balances on the project selection process is vital. Beyond that, good project implementation. The most successful country in Africa in recent years has been Rwanda. It's the one country that's had the fastest rate of poverty reduction anywhere in Africa ever. It's up with the best that China's achieved. And Rwanda did it primarily by having extremely good implementation of public projects. And it did that by accountability of civil servants up a chain of command, ultimately to the president. Every year, the top 200 public officials in the country have to defend publicly what they've done over the year, whether they've met targets. If they haven't met targets, why not? What went wrong? What can be learned from failure? Personal accountability for the successful implementation of a project is vital. And it's very rare. But learn from Rwanda. Then the final stage in public projects is evaluation. If you never evaluate whether things have worked or not, you can never improve your system. And so there has to be rapid, effective evaluation done independently, which then feeds back. You learn how to do things better. So that's the public investment stage. Now let's look at the private investment stage. Public investment and private investment are not alternatives, they're complements. The government builds the roads, the private sector invests in the trucks that run on the roads. Roads without trucks are useless, trucks without roads are useless. So you need a complementary process of private investment. The government doesn't control private investment, it's a private decision set. But those private decisions can either be, yes, we buy trucks, or no, we don't. And that depends upon a whole policy environment that either makes private investment a good idea or a crazy idea. And so just benchmarking the private investment policy environment against the international competition, that's a really sensible thing to do. And there are lots of indices now that 2 minutes Googling will tell you whether your country has a pretty good private investment environment or a lousy one. Let's turn from private investment to the financial sector. And efficient allocation of capital is more important in a poor country than a rich one, because a poor country has less money to allocate, less money that it's saved for investment. And so it's really important that it be well allocated. And so developing a sound and capable financial sector is really important. Most poor countries don't have them. And the key agent which can build that sector is the central bank, because the central bank basically supervises the financial sector. And so the job of the central bank in a resource-rich country is to build the capacity of the financial sector to allocate deposits that, for example, the government might run a surplus. In years when the commodity price is high, it will run a surplus. Some of that could be put in the banking system as long as this then lent wisely. In some poor countries, take Kazakhstan, the private financial sector behaved disastrously. It lent on a construction boom which got completely out of hand. And so just as governments can make mistakes, the private financial sector can make really big mistakes. We've seen that through the financial crisis. And so it's very important not just that the money flow into the financial sector, but that it's properly regulated and supervised so that it's actually taking sensible allocation decisions rather than just a herd instinct doing a construction boom, as happened in Kazakhstan. Finally, let's move to the last component of the investing agenda, and that is the unit cost of capital goods. Investing basically means buying capital goods. And capital goods come in two forms: equipment and structures. The equipment in poor countries is bought from abroad. But one of the tragedies is that the poorest countries pay the most above the world price for a lot of their capital equipment. And that's because the market structure for selling that capital equipment is often monopolistic. There's one trading company will have the right to import a particular type of equipment. It doesn't face any competition, and so its markup can be very, very high. And that market structure of monopoly or cartels is much more common in poor countries precisely because their market size for capital goods is so small. The right approach to dealing with that, I think, is to go in for regional markets. So integrate the market for capital equipment, at least regionally, so that you can, by having a bigger market, you make it more competitive. That's for imported equipment. Finally, we come to structures. Buildings, warehouses, factories, houses, these are a very important component of capital goods. Or for that matter, building infrastructure like roads. It's all part, it's produced by the construction sector. The construction sector builds structures. And in a lot of poor countries, the unit costs of construction are too high. Unit cost of building roads is higher in a lot of poor countries than in rich ones. The unit cost of building houses is higher in poor countries than rich ones. For example, cement, which is a key input into all structures, cement in Africa often costs 3 times the world price. The richest man in Africa, Dangote, who's a nice, modest man, made his $10 billion predominantly out of importing cement. And if you import enough cement at the world price, but the congestion at the ports, the import rules, and so on, mean that the price of cement within the country is 3 times the world price, you end up worth $10 billion. And that's what happened. So there are lots of policy actions that can reduce the unit cost of construction and the unit cost of equipment, bringing down the unit cost of capital both to the public sector and to the private sector. If the unit cost of capital is much higher in a poor country, even if it has a higher rate of saving money for investment, it won't buy a higher rate of capital good acquisition. And it's the capital goods and the structures that determine whether the country grows or not. So that's the waterfront for investing and investing. It takes time. It takes several years. There are benchmarks. For the public sector, you've got the Public Investment Management Index of the IMF. For the private sector, you've got various indices that benchmark the investment policy environment. Unit costs of capital goods, go and look at them. You can do that with 10 minutes Googling. How much does cement cost in your country? How much does a bag cost on the world market? Until you've raised the capacity to invest properly, just saving for investment is a forlorn strategy, because you'll end up with white elephant projects. So investing is the essential precursor to doing a big push of scaling up domestic investment. Thanks very much.